The most powerful of New York's five families was under the direction of John Gotti, who ousted his predecessor using a traditional mob tactic. It was a sizable award. One of the original five families of New York, the Gambino criminal family dominated the city's underworld for many years. One of the most notorious and vicious mafia organizations for years was the Gambino family. In 1985, Gotti gave the order to have the previous boss, Paul Castellano, killed. In 1975, the ailing Carlo Gambino chose Castellano as the family's interim leader. After planning the death of his predecessor, Albert Anastasia, Gambino assumed leadership of the family in 1957. Following the drug sales charges against members of his crew, Gotti was promoted to boss. He apparently feared that because he disobeyed the family's prohibition against drug dealing, Castellano would kill him. But because the other criminal families did not approve of Castellano's murder, there has been ongoing animosity between the groups. Other mafia resented Gotti as well for being overtly flamboyant, such as by posing for images in the media. That exposure to the public didn't seem to harm him for years. Gotti was able to defeat federal accusations and trials for assault and racketeering in the 1980s through strategies that prosecutors would later allege included jury manipulation and witness intimidation, garnering him the nickname Teflon Don from the media. He wouldn't last long being Teflon. While pursuing prosecutions against many of Gotti's powerful cronies, local law enforcement and the FBI were also strengthening their case against Gotti. The Ravenite Social Club, a New York hotspot where Gotti frequently conducted business, was raided by federal officials in 1990, in which the FBI had successfully bugged for years. Sammy the Bull Gravano, Gotti's lieutenant, was one of the many taken into custody alongside him. Gotti was accused of racketeering, 5 murders, including the slaying of Castellano, as well as a murder conspiracy, illegal gambling, loan sharking, bribery, tax evasion, and obstruction of justice. There was a lot of evidence against Gotti, including wiretaps of the Ravenite Social Club that were used as part of the case. Due to the taps, the court denied Gotti's request for bail, and the government successfully argued that 2 of Gotti's preferred attorneys should have been disqualified since they effectively belonged to the criminal organization. Even worse, Gotti was heard insulting Gravano on the tapes, who was disappointed by his time spent working for his employer. After switching sides, Gravano testified during the federal trial that Gotti was the head of the Gambino family and that he had ordered the killings. This time, Gotti was unable to reach the jury or the witnesses, and in 1992, he was found guilty and given a life sentence. The FBI said that the Teflon Don had changed into the Velcro Don. On October 27, 1940, Gotti was born in the Bronx neighborhood of New York City. He was the 5th of John Joseph Gotti Sr. and Philomena Fanny DeCarlo's 13 children. His parents were both born in New York City, but because his parents were married and spent some time there, it is likely that his grandparents were from San Giuseppe Vesuviano in the Italian province of Naples. Gotti was one of 5 brothers who rose to prominence in the Gambino crime family. Peter Gotti was initiated in 1988 under John's leadership, and Richard V. Gotti was exposed as a capo regime by 2002. Eugene Gene Gotti and Richard V. Gotti were the other 2 brothers. John Gotti was the other and was incarcerated, so they were initiated before him. Vincent, the 5th, got started in 2002. From the age of 12, Gotti was a member of street gangs connected to the Mafia in New York City. When he was 14 years old, he tried to steal a cement mixer from a building site, but it toppled and crushed his toes, leaving him with a limp for life. After dropping out of school, he committed himself to working for the Mafia-connected Fulton Rockaway Boys gang, where he made his friends with future Gambino mobsters Wilfred Willie Boy Johnson and Angelo Ruggiero. At a saloon in 1958, Gotti met Victoria DiGiorgio, his future wife, who was half Italian and half Russian. The wedding took place on March 6, 1962. DiGiorgio was previously married and had 1 child from that union, according to FBI records. Angela, Victoria, John Jr., Frank, died in 1980, and Peter were their 5 children. At 1962, Gotti made an effort to find employment legally as a presser in a coat factory and as a backup truck driver, but he was unable to avoid crime, and by 1966, he had already served 2 terms in prison. Gotti gained notoriety throughout 1986 after being named as both Castellano's suspected murderer and his successor. The Gambino family was the most powerful American mafia organization at the time of his takeover, earning $500 million a year. According to Gravano's estimation in the book of Underboss, Gotti earned at least $5 million a year and probably between $10 million and $12 million throughout his tenure as boss. Gotti forbade members of the Gambino family from accepting plea agreements that recognized the existence of the organization in order to protect himself legally. Gotti quickly lost faith in Castellano as a leader because he thought the new boss was too selfish and lonely. Like other family members, Gotti had his own specific dislikes towards Castellano. The boss lacked street cred, and people who had earned their respect working at lower-level positions on the street did not regard him. Gotti also had a financial stake in the matter because he was at odds with Castellano about the share of the proceeds he received from Kennedy Airport hijackings. Gotti was allegedly pushing into the lucrative narcotics sector that Castellano had outlawed. Using recordings from a bug in Ruggiero's home as the main source of evidence, Gene Gotti and Ruggiero were both detained in August 1983 for trafficking heroin. Ruggiero was ordered to provide transcripts of the tapes by Castellano, who had forbade men from his family from distributing drugs on fear of death. When Ruggiero refused, Castellano threatened to demote Gotti. Castellano was detained and charged with RICO in 1984 for the crimes committed by Roy DeMeo's gang, a hitman for the Gambino criminal family. He was charged again for his participation in the Mafia's commission the following year. Castellano, who was facing life in jail in either scenario, set up Gotti to pose as his boss in his absence alongside Thomas Gambino and his favorite capo, Thomas Bilotti. While this was going on, Gotti started planning to overthrow Castellano with the help of fellow disgruntled capos Frank DeCicco and Joseph Joe Piney Armoni, as well as soldiers Sammy Gravano and Robert Dib de Bernardo. Gotti insisted that despite the boss's inaction, Castellano would eventually try to kill him. The endorsement of Armoni was crucial because he would provide the necessary legitimacy as a seasoned veteran who dated back to Vincent Mangano, the family's founder. In the Mafia, it has long been the case that a boss could only be assassinated with the consent of the commission as a whole. The intended assassination by Gotti would have been the first unapproved attack on a boss since Frank Costello came dangerously close to death in 1957. Given that the other four bosses had a history of working with Castellano, Gotti understood that it would be too risky to ask for their assistance. He obtained the backing of several significant figures from his generation in the Lucchesi, Colombo, and Bonanno families to get past this. Since Castellano and Genovese leader Vincent Chin Gigante had such tight relations, he decided against approaching the Genovese family because doing so would have given away his intentions. Gotti could, however, also rely on Gambino consigliere Joseph N. Gallo's cooperation. On December 2, 1985, De La Croce passed away from cancer, and Castellano changed his succession plan by assigning Bilotti as underboss to Thomas Gambino, who took over as the only acting boss, and dissolving Gotti's crew. Gotti decided to assassinate his boss in rage over this and Castellano's failure to attend De La Croce's wake. In December 16, 1985, DeCicco informed Gotti that he would be seeing Castellano and a number of other Gambino mobsters at Sparks Steakhouse. Gotti decided to take advantage of the information. When the boss and underboss arrived for the meeting in the evening, they were both ambushed and killed by assassins working for Gotti. Gotti and Gravano sat in his car and observed the hit. A few days after the assassination, Gallo, DeCicco, and Gotti were selected to serve on a three-person committee to oversee the family until a new leader could be chosen. The fact that an internal inquiry into Castellano's murder was ongoing was also disclosed. The fact that Gotti was operating as the family's boss in all but name, and almost all of the capos knew it, was an open secret. On January 15, 1986, he was formally installed as the new head of the Gambino family during a conference of 20 capos. He retained Gallo as consigliere while appointing DeCicco as the new underboss. At the United States Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois, Gotti was a prisoner. He was only permitted to leave his cell once a day, and he effectively spent the majority of his term in solitary confinement. The United States Supreme Court dismissed his final appeal in 1994. The tumor was removed, but 2 years later it was found that the cancer had come back, so Gotti was sent back to Springfield, where he lived for the remainder of his days. Gotti's health quickly deteriorated, and on June 10, 2002, he passed away at the age of 61.